Rapidly growing.
Non-native tree species.
Consuming.
Alien tree species.
Adapting.
Exotic species.
They conquer.
Forest fire.
Niche markets for non-native.
Invasive species.
Strong bark beetle attack.
Risk.
Alien or a non-native.
Resistance. Heat. Timber market. Ecosystem services. Recreational use. Pests.
Jeopardizing local economies.
Perception. Public. Biodiversity. Urban trees. Resilience. Future. Climate change. Global change.
And devastating entire ecosystems.
This podcast is about the timber in the Alpine Space and especially the timber market. Timber is used in so many different ways and the industry is very diverse. It's not so easy to answer the questions. Are non-native trees important for the timber industry? Will they be more important in future? And what do the different actors of the timber market do with the wood of non-native trees? We are working with two experts, Camila and Martin, two researchers from the University of Life Sciences in Vienna.
My name is Martin Braun and I'm a forest sector modeler at the Institute of Marketing and Innovation at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, Vienna. I work mostly on wood market analysis, starting from the logged roundwood or wood in the rough up to the end products, and also on carbon dynamics in wood products and everything that comes out of the forest. For the ALPTREES project, our focus is to investigate niche markets for non-native tree species, because our hypothesis at the beginning of the project, and we see it now that some aspects of our hypothesis are true, were that non-native tree species can feel niche demand for specific aspects and specific use cases of non-native tree species products, which are worth to further analyze because these market framework conditions are currently not well known.
Actually, it started like a side question we had in ALPTREES, but it becomes a big question because we realized how important the timber sector for us is. When we talk about non-native tree species and how they grow in forests and why you can use them and how you should manage them, we sometimes as ecologists tend to forget that the timber is in the end used by someone, by citizens who buy products made out of non-native tree species timber. That's why this survey becomes important for us.
If there is not well-known framework conditions about the market and we don't know the market dynamics, we usually start with interviews. In this case, it's semi-structured interviews, because to give potential interviewees the freedom to give us information which we sometimes don't expect. So we first focus on very specific questions to get information about the use cases for specific tree species, then price conditions, the volumes processed, and then we move more towards more open questions to semi-structured framework of the interview.
In the beginning, I wanted to interview 300 people, but it was my first experience with semi-structured interviews, and I didn't know how hard it is to find respondents. I'm Camila Maciel, forest engineer from Brazil, and I'm taking my master's studies at BOKU here in Vienna, together with the Department of Marketing and Innovation, and in collaboration with the ALPTREES project. As we are working with this Alpine Space, we are trying to get 3 respondents for each of the 7 countries, and so we will, in the end, will get 21 interviewees. This kind of interview, it takes from 45 to 1 hour, and so it's a lot of material, and then we come to this agreement that 3 per country could be a good number, and from these interviews we hope that we can understand the dynamics of this timber market structure and how it's creating value for these countries.
Some of them are not sure what we are talking about, especially sawmills or wood processors which process larger quantities of wood. They are usually not aware about non-native tree species. For them it's just another input in their raw material consumption. But if we mention specific species and put it into the context of non-native tree species, so if we explain the story behind it a bit, then they usually know what we are talking about, and then they are also more open to give us information about NNTs.
Forest owners or carpenters or artists have used the wood of non-native tree species for many, many years already, but we don't know about it, and we would like to learn from you.
We access sawmills, also carpenters, instrument manufacturers, coffins manufacturers, woodworkers, all these actors that buy this wood from national markets or trans-regional markets or even international markets, but within the Alps, the main actors that we are trying to reach in this interview. And normally they are small, they don't use big amount of non-native trees, also because there is not so much available in the forests, but they are representative, like in their activities. It can be a source of income.
After we have started already like 5-6 months ago, we realized that we get much more information than we actually expected. We know that timber from non-native trees in the Alpine Space is used for outdoor constructions. It's offered in different garden centers for wood constructions on playgrounds, for example. Surprisingly, also for musical instruments. We even found some carpenters who are experimenting a lot with non-native tree species.
And in the context of ALPTREES, the actors are stakeholders along the entire value chain of wood. So we can look somewhere in the beginning of the value chains where we have sawmills and we have wood processors, which, for example, manufacture semi-finished products for parquet floors. And then we have end producers. So sometimes they are not seen as end producers by an average person, for example, artists, which prefer some specific wood of their color or of their patterns. Playground manufacturers, which very much like to use Douglas fir, for example, or elevated bed manufacturers.
To get the information on how much non-native tree species wood and why is processed in the timber industry is not as simple as it seems. Very often companies don't share this information for good reasons. Who wants to give their economical secrets with a random survey? Here we first need to build a little bit of trust before we can gather this information. That's why we started first with a survey of existing data, and now we try to get in touch with a lot of experts who really work with non-native tree species and can give us some insights. The methodology we will use is expert interviews, anonymized. So also here we are trying to be as respectful as possible when it comes to the privacy and the secrets of every company.
Last 20 years we had a lot of Douglas fir, a focus on Douglas fir, and many foresters consider it as a tree for future adaptive forest management. And Pinus strobus is also a tree species where we have more volumes, where even sawmills are aware sometimes and focus on these species. And then we have some, for example, robinia trees. They are sometimes planted with intention because they like to use this wood for outdoor purposes.
They are talking a lot about Paulownia tomentosa, that it's a tree species from China that grows really fast, and it has become quite popular in Europe and in US as well. That it has been discussed in between farmers, the manufacturers, and also in the research environment.
It all shows that non-native trees are becoming interesting for the timber market, and we want to know more about it.
And then, of course, small and medium enterprises, they sometimes really specifically focus on a specific NNT or a specific species because of some desirable properties, and they then usually know a lot about the species. Sometimes they are not aware that it's a non-native tree species.
In the past, there have been described a shift between classical processing of timber to a higher degree of specialization. What makes the timber market also quite interesting, the role of employment and education, which also comes with a higher degree of education of the people who are needed for processing these products. All these factors, the socioeconomic factors, are important when we are analyzing the timber market. So here again we look for data which are very different to the data we used to collect as ecologists. We are very lucky to have Martin and Camila on board for these big tasks because they know very well how to interpret the socioeconomic data so that we can really describe the timber market and draw conclusions.
Our goal in this project is to highlight these uses of these very special trees, and we hope that in the future there will be more awareness about the uses of NNTs.
We are very much looking forward to the results of this survey. That's why we are really looking for inputs from everyone working with non-native tree species timber. So everybody who works with Robinia, timber of Douglas fir, of the red oak, or with Palovnia wood, of maybe even of tree species they don't know really about, because we want to know what they do with it, how they see it, if they see a future in this timber or not. It can be from the energy sector, or it can be from artists. So please get in touch with us and tell us your story. How do you use non-native tree species timber? And why? And how do you like this material or not? And what's more important, how does your client like the non-native tree species? Do they care at all what timber you process? If you have a very strong opinion that non-native tree species timber should not be used at all, this is also quite valuable for us. So if you get really angry after listening to this podcast, please call us or write us an email why we made you angry.
Yes, I would be very glad to talk to you. Reach us and I would be more than happy to go through the conversation.
Thank you, Camila. Thank you, Martin. See you next time. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the ALPTREES podcast.